Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Romeo and Juliet. In this video, we are going to be looking at Act 2, Scene 1. So in between the Capulet party and the balcony scene, it's a scene that focuses mainly on Mercutio and his differing attitudes towards love. So let's get started. Quick plot summary for you. The scene begins with Romeo thinking once more of Juliet and deciding that he can't possibly leave the Capulet mansion. He can't possibly leave whilst Juliet's inside. And so he runs off from his buddies to see if he can find Juliet, leaving Mercutio, Benvolio, and buddies looking for him. So they're calling for him, and Mercutio basically decides that the best way to get him to come along is to talk about Rosaline and to kind of shout out jokes about Rosaline and her physical form. So you've got Mercutio being quite sort of sexual in the way that he describes her, potentially as a means of sort of provoking Romeo to try and get him to come back to them. Benvolio's like, mate, you're just going to make him angry. Let's do one. And so they do. And that is the end of the scene. And so here are the only words that Romeo actually says in the scene before he disappears off. He says, "Can I go forward when my heart is here? Turn back, dull earth, and find thy centre out." Very metaphorical, very, very powerful. He starts off with a rhetorical question, questioning whether or not there's any possibility that he can move on when the person that he loves is in this place. This is to do with time as much as it is to do with love. Like, it's almost like he needs to stay in this moment. My heart is a metaphor, of course, for Juliet, symbolizing his love for her. And then he uses an imperative where he's almost talking to himself, but he's using metaphor. He says, "Turn back, dull earth." Now, dull earth is actually a metaphor for the body. So he's actually instructing his body to move. And when he says turn back, he means to the party or to the mansion, to the house. Turn back, dull earth, and find thy centre out. And thy centre, so if the earth is the body, then the earth's center or the earth's core is like your very essence, isn't it? So it's soul. Like, so turn back, body, and find your soul. So in this case, yeah, center is a metaphor for the soul, but that in itself is of course a metaphor for Juliet. He's saying that his entire existence, his heart, his soul, everything is within those mansion walls, and so he's going to find it. Within a couple of lines, Benvolio tells Mercutio that Romeo did leap this orchard wall. So there's this idea about transcending barriers, removing boundaries. This love that he has for Juliet is so sort of transcendental that it can fly, it can raise him up. So there's this real sense that this love that he has for Juliet is something really special, like in utter contrast to the love that he supposedly had for Rosaline, which actually made him feel awful. This raises him up, this lifts him, this gives him wings, to quote the Red Bull ads. Mercutio, however, has a slightly different view of it. Now, of course, remember that Mercutio and Benvolio don't know about Juliet. They don't know that he's met the love of his life. So they have an assumption that is wrong about Romeo's behaviour here. They assume that this is all part of the Rosaline dread and the Rosaline sadness, which might explain like the way that they're talking to him, particularly Mercutio. So he starts off, they're calling to him. He's like, "Romeo, humours, madman, passion, lover." So all these minor exclamatives that are ways of referring to Romeo. So that humours in this case means like moody. So he's like, "Oh, you're moody, you're mad, you're full of passions, you're such the lover." He's like, come on, Appear thou in the likeness of a sigh, speak but one rhyme, and I'm satisfied. So Mercutio's making fun of him here. He's like, you know, come to us. Just I'll know you're okay if I can just hear you rhyming one more time. So he's making fun of this sort of moody lover that Romeo has kind of presented himself in his attraction to Rosaline. And then he takes a slightly different tack. I conjure thee. So note that verb, which is very much to do with witchcraft, really kind of connotes the supernatural, like like he wants to rise him up. I conjure thee by Rosalind's bright eyes, by her high forehead and her scarlet lip, by her fine foot, straight leg, and quivering thigh, and the demesnes that there adjacent lie. Okie dokie. So yes, you would not be wrong in recognizing that he is being very sexual here. So he's referring to the female body. So you've got that kind of that physicality that he's drawing attention to. The scarlet lips, so the kind of idea of red blood in the lips, sort of associated with like female orgasm. The fact that she has a quivering thigh, the adjective quivering, again, perhaps referencing sexual pleasure. And then obviously the last bit there is being very, very clear because he's talking about what lies adjacent to her thighs. So he's talking about her genitalia, sexual organs. And so, I mean, this is really rude. And we know that Mercutio is quite bawdy in his humour, but this is really provoking because he's being very disrespectful here. And Benvolio worries. Benvolio tells him off and says, you know, you're going to make him angry. And actually Benvolio, this is Benvolio's line here, whereas everything else has been Mercutio. Benvolio says, come, he hath hid himself among the trees to be consorted with the humorous knight. Blind is his love, and best befits the dark. So this is the love that Benvolio, this is the love for Rosaline that Benvolio is talking about here. And notice how he uses language to do with darkness. He says it befits the dark because his love is blind. He can't see because of this love. And it comes back to that image that we had of Romeo in Act 1, Scene 1, hiding in amongst the sycamore trees. So Benvolio is assuming that Romeo is feeling exactly the same way as he was before and is therefore kind of like sulking and hidden off in the night. Mercutio plays on this. Plays on the words that Benvolio uses. If love be blind, love cannot hit the mark. So talking about whether or not Romeo can be successful sexually, probably. Now will he sit under a medlar tree and wish his mistress were that kind of fruit as maids call medlars when they laugh alone. Okay, so he could be saying, I hope that Romeo sits under a tree as if that tree was a woman and receives the fruit that falls down, the medlars, which are kind of like apples. But Shakespeare is also playing on popular puns of the time because the medlar fruit was also used to describe female genitalia. So actually he's hoping that Romeo gets to sit under a tree where the fruit is female genitalia. So he's wishing him sex. If that wasn't clear enough, he then says, Romeo, that she were, oh, that she were an open arse and thou a poppin pear. Okay, so the open arse again refers to female genitalia. The poppin pear looked a bit like a penis. So again, he's quite clearly wishing him sex. Now, you might think to yourself, oh, crikey, it's not wildly appropriate, is it, for a GCSE text? But if you think, well, why is Shakespeare doing this? What's the point of it? The scene begins with Romeo's transcendental love that makes him able to scale walls, you know, leap over in order to reach his love, this kind of beacon of light, what he sees as his soul. And that's contrasted with this very kind of bawdy, very kind of sexualized language. And then, believe it or not, Act 2, Scene 2, we're going to go back to Romeo and Juliet. So I think this is here to offer a real kind of stark contrast, and again perhaps elevate the love that Romeo is feeling, because it's not this kind of love that Mercutio is talking about, which is very physical, very sexual, very just pleasure oriented, rather than being about true love. So that's it from us, really. Just a couple of thoughts in terms of what the key themes of this scene are. Obviously, we've got love versus lust or sex, as seen through that contrast. We've also got this idea about friendship as well, because we can't ignore the fact that Mercutio and Benvolio, particularly Mercutio, are a bit irritated by Romeo at this moment. There's this kind of idea of them as a group, and he seems to be changing his patterns of behaviour for the sake of love. Now, they think it's Rosaline, they don't realise it's this true version, this true form of love. But we can definitely see this moment of where is Romeo in relation to this friendship? And as the play progresses, we see how this friendship is so important, because it's to do with loyalty. Again, this is very much, it comes back to these two sides again, these feuds where male friendships are so important, and this is a challenge to that at this moment. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. Hope that was helpful. Drop me a line in the comments if you've got any questions. Click that button if you haven't subscribed, and then you'll know when the next scene is coming up, along with all of the other videos that I am making for you. Okay, enough from me. Thank you very much. Happy revising.